I want to share a little of my own personal story
我想要跟大家也分享一些我自己个人的故事，
because I am part of the bride of Christ as well.
因为我也是基督心腹的一个部
And
分。
we all have individual stories to tell.
我们每个人都有自己很个人的故事可以分享的。
I was born and raised in a Christian family,
我是生长在一个基督的家庭里面，
and I was living in the very heart of London.
我住在伦敦的市中心。
My parents took me to church every Sunday,
每个礼拜天，我的爸爸妈妈都会带我上
but
教
I
会。
grew up to really dislike the church.
但是当我长大之后，我开始非常的不喜欢教会，
I was never happy in church.
因为我在教会里面从来都没有快乐
I
过。
felt the people looked very unhappy.
我也感觉到教会里面的人每个人看起来都不快乐。
I never understood what the preacher was talking about.
我从来都没有办法理解讲道的在讲什么，
For me, as a young child,
因为对一个小孩子来说，
he always seemed very angry,
他永远看起来讲员看起来就是那么的生气，
telling us how we were not living as Jesus wanted us to live.
一直在告诉我们说，我们没有照着耶稣要我们活的方式去生活。
So I grew up with a sense of disapproval of God.
所以我是带着神的否定这样子来成长的，
And so I didn't like Christian religion at all.
所以我完全是不喜欢这个基督信仰。
And so when I got to my teenage years,
所以当我十几岁的时候，
I started breaking the heart of my family.
我就开始让我的家人心碎了。
I started living a life that was ungodly.
我开始活一个不属神的生活，
And my family began to despair.
我的家人开始感觉到绝望，
They did not know what to do with me.
他们不知道要拿我怎么办。
By the time I got to 19 years old,
当我19岁的时候，
I'd left home
我离家了，
and I was living on the streets of London.
我就住在伦敦的街头上，
I had no home,
我没有家，
and I mixed with people that were violent and very immoral.
我开始跟这一些非常粗暴、没有任何道德标准的人混在一
We
起。
used a lot of alcohol and a lot of illegal drugs.
我们使用许多的酒精跟毒品。
I thought I was having a great time.
我以为我正在享受人生，
I was free from the restraints of my parents.
我从我父母亲的这样子的一个压制里面，我得自由了，
And I could live as I wanted to live.
我可以活我想要活的生活。
The problem was I got into trouble.
问题是我惹上了麻烦。
One day I cut my finger,
有一天我割到我的手指，
and when I looked at the wound,
当我看着那个伤口的时候
I，fainted.
我就晕过去了。
And when I came to,
那我就醒过来的时候呢，
I was full of fear.
我心里满了恐惧，
I was afraid of being alone.
我害怕单独一个人，
I was afraid of being in crowded spaces.
我害怕在一个拥挤的空间里面。
Fear was just controlling every part of my life.
这个恐惧控制了我生命中的每一个部分。
As the days went by,
日子一天一天的过去，
I was having panic attacks
我就开始有恐慌，
several times a day.
一天有好几次的恐慌的攻击，
And I began to suffer from depression.
我就开始有了忧郁症。
Fear was the dominating emotion in my life.
那个时候，在我的生命当中最大的一个情绪就是恐惧。
I was afraid to go to sleep at night
我晚上害怕睡觉，
because I thought I might die in my sleep.
因为我以为我睡着睡着我就会死去了。
So as silly as it sounds,
所以现在听起来是很，
I would
现在
give
听起来是很愚
myself
蠢。
heart massage as I was lying in my bed.
当我躺在床上的时候，我会开始按摩自己的心脏。
It must have worked because I'm here today.
大概是有效吧，因为我今天还站在这
But
里。
fear crippled my life.
但是恐惧让我的生命没有办法继续下去。
I became so unwell
我生病了，
that I was unable to function where I was living.
我没有办法在我所住的地方过正常的生活。
On one occasion, I was with my friends on the underground system in London.
有一天，我跟我的朋友在伦敦的地铁 下面，
and I started having a panic attack.
我就开始有一个恐慌，
And I thought I was going mad.
我以为我要疯掉了，
And I started freaking out, panicking.
我就开始进入一个极大的一个害怕里面。
And I curled up under a bench where people sit on. I curled up underneath it.
那因为在地铁站有那些长条凳，我就卷束在那个地方。
And all my friends ran away and left me.
我所有的朋友他们都离开我跑掉了，
I came up out of the underground system.
我就从地铁站上来，
And I walked and walked and walked for miles.
我一直走，一直走，走了好远的路。
It was pouring with rain,
那天下大雨，
and it was the middle of the night.
而且是在半夜。
I went to a park in London,
我去到伦敦的一个公园，
and it was closed.
它已经关起来了，
So I climbed over the gate,
所以我爬过那个栅栏，
and I wandered in the park alone,
我一个人在公园里头漫
and
步，
I found a bench to sit on.
我找到一个可以坐下来的椅子，
And I cried out to God.
我在那里我呼求神，
And I said, God, if you really loved me,
我说神啊，如果你真的是爱我的话，
if you're really there,
如果你真的在那里的话，
why have you allowed this to happen to me?
你为什么允许这些事情发生在我身上？
You see, there's a thing about our lives.
你知道吗？在我们的生命中会有这样的状况。
When bad things happen, we think it might be God's judgment.
当坏事发生在我们的生命当中的时候呢，我们就以为是神的审判临到了。
And when good things happen, we say, oh, that's good luck.
当好事临到的时候呢，我们就说那是运气真好。
So I was angry at God,
所以我对神非常的生气，
disappointed with life,
对生命非常的失望
but。I needed help.
但是我需要帮助，
I was so alone,
我那样子的孤单
and，I was so afraid.
那样子的害怕，
And I asked God to help me.
我就求神来帮助我。
And suddenly this thought came into my mind.
忽然间，一个思想进到我的脑袋里，
And this was a memory that he brought to me
一个是神带给我的回忆，
of an incident that happened a year prior to this occasion.
就是在这个时间之前1年所发生的一件事情。
And the incident was this.
事情是这样的，
I had left home
我离家了，
and I was with my friends
我跟我的朋友在一起，
in a bar.
在一个酒吧里面，
And I had been drinking very heavily.
我喝了很多的酒。
And there was a water fountain outside of the bar.
那在这个酒吧的外面呢，有一个喷水池。
And I, along with some other friends, had been dancing in the water fountain,
我跟我其中的一些的朋友啊，就跳到水池里面去跳舞，
thinking that we were very funny.
感觉我们是很有趣的人。
We came into the bar dripping wet
我们全身湿哒哒的走进那个酒吧里
to
面，
have another drink.
因为我们要再喝一杯。
And then suddenly there was a silence in the bar.
忽然间，酒吧里面完全的安静下来，
And people looked beyond me to the door.
人们看着那个门，是超越我去看着那个门。
And I turned around slowly to see who was there.
我慢慢转身去看谁在哪里呢？
And it was actually my mother.
那其实是我的妈妈。
And I was embarrassed that my mother had tracked me down.
我非常的尴尬，因为我妈妈竟然找到我了。
She had found where I was,
她找到我在哪
and she
里，
wanted to talk to me.
她想要跟我讲话。
We went to one side,
我们就走到旁边，
and she said this to me.
她就这样对我说
Clive, we do not understand what you're doing with your life.
她说 Clive， 我们真的不明白你拿你自己的生命来做什么，
But we want you to know that we love you,
但是我们要你知道我们爱你，
and we're always here for you.
我们为你永远都会在这里。
And with that, she left.
她讲完之后就离开了。
I thought that was very embarrassing,
我那时候只是觉得非常的尴尬，
and I dismissed her.
我就不再去想这件
And I
事情，
just got on with living the life that I wanted to live.
我继续去活我想要的生活方式。
And now I find myself in the middle of the night
现在我看见我自己在半夜，
in a park in London
在伦敦那个公园里面，
in the pouring rain,
滂沱大雨中，
asking God to help me.
来请求神来
And
帮
he
助我。
brought this memory back to me.
他就把这个回忆带回来给我。
And I realized that the only people on this planet that loved me were my parents.
我发现在这个地球上唯一爱我的人就是我的父母
And
亲，
so I made a decision
所以我做了一个决定，
to humble myself
我要谦卑下来，
and to find my way back home.
我要再一次找到回家的路。
It took a long time to walk from where I was to where they lived.
从我所在的地方要走到他们家，我花了很长的时间。
But I remember knocking on the door.
但是我记得我在敲门，
And my mother opened the door.
我妈妈开门，
And she said, "Hello, Clive.
她说 ：“Hey, Clive，
Come on in. Your room's ready for you."
进来吧，你的房间为你预备好了。”
And I found a place of love and acceptance.
我找到那个爱我并接纳我的地方。
Even though I was angry and resentful of them,
虽然我对他们生气，我拒绝他们，
I knew they loved me.
但是我知道他们爱我。
But as I came into this place of safety,
但是当我进入这个安全的地方的时候，
it was like my whole life just collapsed.
它就如同我整个生命就这样子就崩溃了。
And I was too afraid to step outside of their home for 1 year.
一整年的时间，我不敢离开他们的家。
If anybody came to visit the home,
有人来家里探访，
I would run away to my bedroom and lock the door.
我就会躲到我的房间，把门锁起来。
I thought I would find peace in rock music.
我以为我会在摇滚乐里头找到
And
平
so I
安
would，listen to rock music.
所以我听很多的摇滚乐，
It gave me no help whatsoever.
对我来说完全没有帮助。
I thought I would get help in more drink and drugs.
我以为我更多的喝酒，更多的吸毒，我就得到帮
It
助，
didn't help me at all.
完全没有。
My mind was damaged.
我的头脑完全是被毁坏了，
My emotions were broken.
我的情绪也崩坏了。
And in that situation,
在这样子的一个状况当中，
I was trying to find something to give me peace.
我试着要找到那个可以给予我平安的东西。
My aunt and uncle came to visit,
我的叔叔婶婶来探访，
and they were very committed Christians.
他们也是非常信实的基督徒。
And they had started youth work in the inner cities.
他们在城市里面开始了青少年的事工，
But my uncle was a real man's man.
但是我叔叔是那种男人中的男人。
And I was speaking with him.
我在跟他谈话，
And I said to him, "How can you be a Christian and live as a car mechanic with all these other men?"
你怎么可以成为一个基督徒，但是同时又跟这些其他修车子的这些技工一起生活呢？
Do they not make fun of you?
他们不会取笑你吗？
And he was honest with me.
他对我非常的诚
He
实。
said, "Yes, sometimes they do.
他说会啊，有时候他们会啊。
But if Jesus was willing to die for me,
但是如果耶稣愿意为我死，
then I'm willing to suffer a little for him."
那我也会愿意为耶稣来有一点点的受苦。
Now, at the same moment,
就在那个时刻，
his wife, my auntie, came into the room
我的婶婶呢就走到房间里面来，
and she said these words,
她就说了这些话，
"Clive, God has spoken to me."
说 Clive， 神对我说，
I thought she had gone mad.
我以为她疯了，
She's now got voices in her head.
她现在在脑子里听到声音，
But she began to describe my life on the inside.
但是她开始在描述我那在内在的生命。
She said, "You're like a man that wants the kingdom of heaven,
她说你像那个想要天国的那一个人，
but you want to live in the world."
但是你又想要活在世界上。
And she said, "This day, you need to make a decision."
但是在今天你需要做一个决定。
And she challenged me.
她挑战我，
She said, "Clive, why do you not accept Jesus into your life?"
她说 Clive， 你为什么呢？为什么不能够把耶稣迎接到你的生命里面
He
呢？
loves you.
他爱你，
He died for you on the cross.
他为你在十字架上
He
死，
rose from the grave
他从坟墓里复活，
to give you resurrection power to live well for today.
好让你能够得着那复活的大能，好让你今天能够好好的过活。
Well, you have not met my auntie,
你们没遇见过我婶婶，
but you don't argue with my auntie.
但是你不会跟她辩论的。
And she said, "Clive, let's kneel down and pray."
所以当她说 Clive， 我们跪下来祷告，
So by the side of my bed, I knelt down,
所以我就在我的床边就跪下来了。
and they invited me to say a prayer.
他们就邀请我来做一个祷告，
It was simply like this:
很简单，就是这样子的。
"Dear Lord Jesus,
亲爱的主耶稣，
nobody loves me more than you.
没有人比你更爱我，
You're the only one that were willing to lay their life down to save me.
你是唯一那一位愿意舍弃生命来救我的。
This day, I choose to give my life to you,
今天我也选择要把我的生命献
and
给
I
你，
ask you to come into my life to save me.
求你进到我的生命当中来拯救我，
to forgive me of my sins,
饶恕我的过犯，
and to cleanse me from all unrighteousness.
也帮助我，让我洗净我一切的不义。
I give my life to you.
我把我的生命献给你。
And that day I gave my life to Jesus.
就在那一天，我把我的生命给了耶稣。
Jesus came into me.
耶稣进到我的里面，
He forgave me of my sins.
他饶恕我了我的罪，
And he began to do a work of healing in my life.
他就开始在我的生命里面进行医治的工作。